Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Yeah, well, it just, the layperson like me, I'm out here and I'm just like, that guy just seemed like he got off easy, on occasion, especially when you go back to what we were talking about originally with, child sex traffickers and people like that. You're just like, people like that shouldn't ever get a plea deal. But like you said, if you can flip them and then get to somebody that's higher up and maybe bring down the whole cartel, then, that's, that certainly makes sense. But I don't know, maybe you need a better PR guy. That's that would help with, making things a little more, acceptable to the public.
What I like, each state is different, but, in California, for instance, for these violent sex crimes, right? Rape, sexual abuse, and this, that, the judges have to run the sentences consecutively. These back to back. You can't get any concurrent time. And so we saw someone like Danny Masterson, a Hollywood actor recently, was convicted of raping two women. He got 30 years because the judge didn't have any discretion to give him anything less. It's a 15-year minimum. Two victims, you're getting 30 years in prison. So that's what I like to see for those types of crimes of violence, sex crimes. You really shouldn't be getting concurrent time.
Oh, absolutely. So as a prosecutor, is there any particular case that, well, you know what, we already talked about the kingpin, but in your current practice, you've also, and the name of you started a practice after you left the city, and, you have a bunch of lawyers working for you now. What's some of the big cases you've worked there?
Yeah, so right now we've handled a lot of cases, involving folks who have died, suffered catastrophic injuries. We're in Hollywood, so we end up dealing with a lot of celebrities. We've sued a lot of celebrities for, we're representing the Lizzo plaintiffs right now. We're representing the folks who have sued Kanye West, or who's now known as Ye. So we end up, just because of the nature of where we are and what we do, we end up getting a lot of those Hollywood type cases. But, we'll see all types, we'll see officer involved shootings. We'll see, abuse victims. I represent women, lots of them who have been raped or sexually abused. So just really sad stuff. Unfortunately, when you're a practicing lawyer, usually you're in the business of misery. No one's calling you with good news. Doesn't matter what type of lawyer you are. For us, something bad has happened. But most lawyers, someone's getting divorced or someone's been arrested. Just bad. So, unfortunately, all we can do is try to kind of put the pieces together, make things right. But I think all of them would say, hey, I give every dollar back, or I don't care even if the person is in prison. I just wish this didn't happen to me. And so a lot of what we do is try to get them justice, but things will never be, the way they were before the horrific incident happened.
Yeah, of course. So I read that you represented Johnny Manziel. What was that? What was that about?
Yeah. So Johnny Manziel, he was married to a friend of mine. She's an actress. She's now in Selling Sunset. And that's one of the few defense cases I took. He, was sued by his landlord for some damage to his house. So that was a case I handled as a favor to him. This is when he was kind of transitioning off from the NFL and trying to get his life back in order. I mean, he was actually also the subject of a recent documentary that kind of discussed his, alcohol and substance abuse issues and kind of hitting rock bottom. But so, we helped him out in that case, just resolved it. But that's probably one of the last defense cases I took. And it was really as a favor to his wife at the time.
Yeah, I think his story is just one of the most tragic. And personally, I think he is a good example of why industry itself needs to be careful on giving too much success too fast, because I just don't think he was ready for it. He was only a freshman when he won his Heisman, and I think it destroyed him. And
I agree. We talked about I was too young for Harvard Law School. You're talking about the first ever redshirt freshman to win that Heisman Trophy, right? So, all the money he got, all the fame, at a really young age. You talk about your daughter. Imagine, everywhere she goes, right? You got Sports Illustrated, ESPN, and you're drafted in the first round by the NFL. And some of it is, kind of the hangers on and the entourage and folks that aren't necessarily a good influence. But I mean, I'm a big college football fan, and any football fan will tell you the average life for an NFL player is just a few years. It's a very hard profession to be in.
Yeah.
And here's someone who had a lot of success. He was Mr. Texas, right? He committed to Oregon, then went to A&M, and he beat Alabama, wins the Heisman Trophy, and all of a sudden he's kind of put in this position where he's surrounded by people that really don't have his best interest in mind. And I think he'll say this, I love Johnny. I still consider him a friend and a former client, but I don't think, he was ready for all that in terms of the success and the money and everything that kind of came along with it.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't think most kids that are 25 and younger aren't ready for any kind of real, massive success like what was his first contract, like $40 million or something? You hand that kind of money to an 18-year-old, and I bet 99.9% of them just cannot fathom it. They think that the money is never going to end. It doesn't matter how much they spend, doesn't matter what they do. They can't do anything wrong. They can't overspend. And it's just a mentality, I think, that they get into, and it just destroys them. And it's sad to see it.
Yeah, it is. And, what I tell folks that, I have friends, I have relatives that, have success in professional sports. And I always say, listen, like, maybe because I'm in my 40s now, you're not going to be young forever. You're not going to play. We got to think about life after football. Like, what's the plan? And, I think Johnny would have been a great coach. I know it's hard for him to kind of give up his football career, but, whether it's, broadcasting or coaching, if you want to kind of stay in the game, let's have a plan, because it's very hard. The Tom Brady's and people that are playing into their 40s, those are very few and far between. I mean, those are for the unicorns out there. Most folks, by the time they're in their mid 30s, I mean, it's time to hang it up.
No, absolutely. I personally, I think Shaquille O'Neal is probably, out of all the athletes that I've ever seen, he's handled it the best. But
yeah, no, he's had some
a lot of success
yeah.
stories out there. I was really good friends with Chad Lewis, that played for the Eagles, and BYU guy, and just absolute amazing guy. And he talked about a lot of that. He said the locker rooms were just an interesting place to be, and but he brought a maturity to the locker room that the coaches really appreciated. And I think the veterans, those kind of guys, and in this, I mean, there's a reason that senior partners aren't 2 years out of law school.
Sure.
It's, you guys have to bring these young guys into the fold and kind of teach them the ways and tell them to slow down. You're not going to be, trying the O.J. Simpson trials, right out of law school. You need to learn the trade. You need to learn how to do things. And if you get too big, too fast, man, it's a long way to fall.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, I've been doing this more than 20 years right now, and I can't even imagine, handling these types of cases, as a first, second, third year attorney. But that's what these athletes, are tasked with doing. And it's really a recipe for failure. Again, unless they get those advisors, financial, legal, you get your systems in place. I think, some of these professional sports organizations, these leagues, are doing a lot better, trying to educate them. But, I remember, I went to Houston to visit a buddy of mine, and he's a successful lawyer, and he happened to live in the same building as Vince Young. And Vince was not, just said hi to him. It's not like a friend or anything, but, it was a very nice building in Houston, probably one of the nicest ones. And then, a few years later, I'm watching like ESPN 30 for 30, and it's broke, and it's on Vince Young. I'm like, how did, someone I saw just a few years before end up on a Netflix documentary broke? I mean, here's someone that won a national championship, again, first round draft pick, NFL starting quarterback, and it just, in a matter of years, it was all gone.
Yeah. Well, how did Mike Tyson blow through $300 million?
Yeah.
Just, I can't fathom how he did it, but he did. So,
no.
that's some serious spending there. So,
Yeah, it's like
Hey,
those
last thing.
yeah, it's like those lottery winners, by the way. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I mean, same thing. They get all this
Yeah.
money and a lot of them just end up, just spending it all because they've never been used to managing it like that. So.
Yeah, 100%. So last thing, your book, Harvard hashtag. Tell me a little bit about that and what inspired you and how did you find the time to write a book?
So I was doing Nancy Grace's show during the pandemic, and I think we were either talking about Derek Chauvin and George Floyd or Kyle Rittenhouse. It was a longer case, a more controversial case. So, there were multiple segments. So we went to a commercial. I was just talking to Nancy. I've been on her show several times, and she's like, you know what, Neama? And she has her, her Southern accent. You know what, Neama? You're representing these big companies. You were a prosecutor for years. Now you have your own firm. You've done all this. You've done so many different things. Like, you should write a book. And I'm like, you know what? I will write a book. So it was during the pandemic. We were shut down. We're working from home. We were in California for a year and a half. So, I write basically like a chapter a week on all sorts of different kind of topics, things, war stories, things that were interesting because I went to Harvard Law School. I kind of had this path. And now we're one of the big firms on social media, right? I'm doing this true crime commentary. So we're doing TikToks, Instagram reels, some unique things. So I just kind of talked a little bit about my transition from, big law to prosecution, setting aside my dreams of taking the bench to, kind of pursue financial security for my family, starting my own firm and doing some of the social media. So I got to say Nancy Grace was the inspiration for that.
Oh, that's awesome. In fact, preparing for that, I saw that you wrote that book. I was like, oh, I bet that is interesting. And so I jumped on Amazon and ordered it. So
yeah, hopefully liked it.
Harvard hashtag. Everybody jump on Amazon and go order that book. I'm sure it's going to be. I can't wait to read it. I just finished a book called In My DNA. It's a good friend of mine is detective for a lot of years up in Tacoma, and she wrote that book In My DNA, and it was really good. So
I'll check it out. And just one thing about the book, Jared, just trying to close the loop. Every dollar, all the proceeds from that book go to foster kids. So it's not a moneymaker, donating every dollar to the kids that really need it. So thanks for your support. It's going to a good cause.
Awesome. Well, that's all the more reason. Anybody that supports a foster care program, that's a good reason to go buy that book. So, all right, Neama, any last advice for those of us that want to avoid guys like you?
No, listen to the podcast. Jared, you got a great one. Thank you so much for having me. Again, I just want to really give credit to you for building something so successful, but more importantly, what you've done in your personal life. Really, if anyone's listening, you want to make a difference in this world, think about fostering, volunteer with children. They desperately, desperately need it. It can change a life. So,
yeah, well, I can't think of a better way to end this episode on that. So, Neama, I appreciate you coming on, and fantastic. Anybody that needs a really good lawyer down in the LA area, I'll give you a call.
Thanks so much, Jared. Hope to be on again soon.
Oh, my pleasure. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.